and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Jo Wheatley, and my friend and co-host Zoe Hawkins.
Hi, everybody. Today we are talking about how to coach overwhelm. This is a really common emotion, challenge, situation that clients bring into the coaching space, and you yourself may actually at times feel like you're overwhelmed. So today's episode is for those who are interested in, so if I become a coach, how would I tackle these particular topics? And if you are a coach, picking up some hints and tips on how you can support people with overwhelm. Same with line managers and leaders. You're going to have people in your team often coming into your office. They may not say they're overwhelmed, but you have a sense that actually they are struggling in some capacity to prioritize or make decisions, which is a symptom of overwhelm. So that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and I think we have lots of positive feedback about these kind of episodes because when you do coaching training, wherever you do it, you don't tend to be taught about how to apply it to specific situations. You tend to be taught about the tools, the semi-structures and conversations. And so it's natural when you're at that point to think about, what you actually get in a coaching conversation with the client is a client either saying, oh, I just feel so overwhelmed, or you might see some other symptom of overwhelm. And you then might be thinking, oh, which of my things do I use for that? So we really hope that today's podcast is a really practical episode that speaks to something that is coming up for you and will help you in that space. So maybe I should just actually pick up on what I was saying there around how overwhelm might show up in a coaching conversation. So I think I was just saying there, your client might not say, I feel so overwhelmed. So what else might you notice in your client? You might notice that they can't find the words to answer a question. And they're in that almost like freeze state where they can't access their normal knowledge, skills, experience, or they are struggling to translate what they're feeling into words. So, that can happen, and that might be different to how you usually experience the client in that situation. It could be that the client is talking so fast they can barely keep up themselves with their own stream of consciousness, and they're finding it difficult to filter their thoughts into like a decision or an answer to the question that you have given them. Those would be some typical things you might see, Zoe.
I think a lack of being able to decide what to focus on in the coaching session. So often a coach will begin a coaching session with, so what would you like to work on today? And you might typically get I don't know. I don't know. No idea. And that is a really interesting place to start in your coaching. I remember turning up to a supervision session once and I shared with my supervisor, it was during lockdown, life was, very busy for lots of reasons back then. I turned up to the session. I was like, I know I've had this supervision session in my mind. I've been thinking about it all morning and I've been trying to decide like what to bring and what to focus on. And I just don't know. And she just sat peacefully and quietly and said, should we start there? And I think I cried at that point. So, a lack of being able to make a decision or set a priority or, think about what you want to achieve can be a sign of overwhelm. Not always. So you can't make judgments and assumptions, but those are signs to get curious about what is happening for your client in that moment.
Yeah. And of course they may, as we said, they might say, oh, I don't know, I just feel so overwhelmed. Like you might ask a question, what would you like to do next? What's the first next step if those are the types of questions that you ask as a coach? And they may have been fine up until the point of taking action. And so it's also interesting to notice where in the conversation. So Zoe, you gave an example of like, what would you like to focus on in today's session? That's right at the beginning of the session. The action bit might come towards the end. And it equally could come up or show up there. And often then as coaches, I think when you've got that time barrier of the end of the session, your client is sharing with you they're feeling overwhelmed. Guess what happens for you? At that point, you may feel overwhelmed and think, oh, now what happens with overwhelm is you might describe it as a way of feeling like you just don't have the resources. What's being required of you is more than you're capable of in that moment. Now, I think you could also describe it in some ways as an out of body experience. So the client might be finding it very difficult to be and stay in the present, in their body, grounded into that space. So we can talk about in a little bit about some of the things that you can do in that situation. And overwhelm, we would describe as potentially being like an umbrella term. So, an umbrella term for a cluster of emotions. And what people might mean by overwhelm is I'm having a number of different emotional experiences simultaneously, and I cannot name one of them.
Yeah, it's hard to process overwhelm if you don't know what it is you're experiencing. And so you just put this blanket of a generic term over the top. And one of the first things I think that you can do when you've identified with your client that it is overwhelmed, so you need to get to that point, is just ask your client, like, what does that mean to them? What is overwhelm to them? How can they describe the experience they're having? Because it would be very easy for you as the coach to assume that you know what overwhelm is like for that client, particularly if you experience it yourself frequently or even infrequently. You can make assumptions that your experience is the same, when the reality is we all experience emotions differently. So first, helping your client to articulate what is the experience of overwhelm that they are having in that moment. And the reason we do that isn't just for your benefit as the coach to understand your client's like internal world. It's so the client can put those words to it, so there isn't now just a blanket thing that is going on. They're able to articulate it. Some clients may really struggle to do that, particularly if they're neurodivergent. They may have an inability to really put words to emotions. So you may be using like sounds. So you might say, for example, what is overwhelmed to you? And they might just go, it's just, oh. So you would need some skills to be able to work with that as well. And clean language is a great place to go. If you haven't heard of clean language, that is where you use the client's words to help to broaden out their internal experience. So you might say something like, well, what kind of like is that to you? Or where do you experience in your body? So just working with the client's words can really help them to start to describe what's going on for them.
Yeah, metaphor can be very helpful as well to break down overwhelm. So if you ask them to share with you, more about the overwhelm, and they might say, I just feel like I'm drowning. That might be a common um, expression when somebody is experiencing that. So they're still not talking about I. So what you notice about the metaphor is it sort of distances the experience. It's still that experience is outside of them, and so you can work with that. So are you on your own? Where are you? Are you in a swimming pool? Are you in an ocean? Trying to get some perspective around it. Because if you think back to overwhelm as being this like umbrella or blanket term for a number of different emotions, helping the client to understand what those individual emotions are that are part of it is a key step to helping them break the overwhelm down into manageable chunks. And so if they aren't able to identify, like you might even want to share with them, like, have you ever thought about overwhelm as like an umbrella term for emotions? And they'll be like, what do you mean? And they might say, with some clients, experience overwhelm as like a number of different emotions where you're sort of flooded by a range of them, but you can't really identify what they are. Does that resonate with you at all? And the client was like, yeah, actually, that probably is what it is. So then you might say, okay, so if it were to be a cluster of emotions, what's the first emotion, that comes to mind? Or you might get out a tool like the emotions wheel or the feelings wheel and say, like, is there any fear in the overwhelm? And then the client might say, oh, I just feel I'm just petrified that X. Okay, so you're petrified about that. Okay, where shall we put that? You might see a shelf like behind your client. Do you want to put that on the shelf for a minute? And so then you're working with the metaphor, like, yeah, how does it feel with that being over there? Yeah, it's okay that it's over there. Okay, is there any, and you might offer another emotion, is there any sadness in it? Yes or no? Do the same thing. And then they might say, then they might start to get into their groove and say, do you know what? What I'm noticing is I just had this word or this emotion come into my mind. And so then they are, getting into the flow and helping to break the overwhelm down.
You may have clients that are less inclined to want to work on an emotional, like labeling way. It may be things actually that they are most in contact with that is creating the overwhelm. And a great way to be able to work with that is to use some creative methods like drawing, for example. So you might draw on a piece, invite the client to draw on a piece of paper, like a boundary, which is like that represents their world. And just ask them, like, so what are the things or the experiences that are making up this overwhelm, and just get them to plot firstly everything that's obvious. And at this point your client's going to draw on the things that are most in their present awareness. So it might be, I don't know, some decisions they've got to make about their child's education, or it might be that they are facing some big decisions about caring for their elderly parents, or it could be anything. It might be that the car needs to go in for an MOT. Like, there might just be lots of big things and lots of small things, and that is all creating this sense of overwhelm. And then you could start to draw their attention to what is maybe in their subconscious, because when we're overwhelmed by all the things that we think are going on, we would tend to like push down and bury some other things that may be significant that are contributing to the overwhelm. So they might say something like, well, I have been thinking, there's this issue in my team. I've been meaning to deal with it for a while, but I can't deal with it right now because because I'm just not in the right place for it. And you might invite them, well, where would you put that in your map or in your boundary? And it may be that the things that they are suppressing are the things that they actually need to prioritize, because they're the ones that are gnawing away in the back of their mind, hidden in a box somewhere to deal with later. But your body, your subconscious, your energy knows that it's there and needs to be dealt with. So working creatively through drawing and eliciting different situations, events, and things. And if you then your client's getting into, you might invite the different emotions. So what emotion does that situation evoke for you, or what emotions does it evoke for you? So again, breaking down the overwhelm. And I think what you're hearing here in this podcast is one important step to helping your client with overwhelm is to break it down. And what you're doing by breaking it down is taking your client out of the future and into the present, because overwhelm is a symptom of being in the future, like thinking about all the things that need to be done or aren't resolved or are on the mind. Whereas in the present moment, what is here? And that helps the client to make decisions and prioritize and pick the most important things. But if you're constantly out in the future, it's very hard to be taking action from the here and now.
You could use cognitive behavioral coaching as a tool with overwhelm. So, um, if you've got that think, feel, and do or behavior. So, if the client says, I just feel so overwhelmed. Okay, you're feeling overwhelmed. What are you thinking as a result of feeling overwhelmed? Well, I'm thinking I've got to do all of these things and I haven't got enough time, and so I'm feeling overwhelmed. Okay, so it's that way around. So you're thinking that you've got to do all of these things and it's got to be you that's doing it. You're feeling overwhelmed. And how are you behaving? What are you doing? Well, I'm not doing any of the things that I need to do, or I'm not getting to the end of any of the things that I need to do. Okay, and how else are you behaving? What else are you doing? Well, I'm starting to panic because there are all these deadlines. I really need to achieve them. Like, my reputation is on the line, but at the same time, I'm like missing out on these things over here, and I'm just feeling a bit lost. Okay, so you're thinking this, you're feeling overwhelmed, and you're feeling a bit lost, and these are the behaviors. Yeah. Okay, how do you want to be feeling? I want to be feeling in control. Like, I want to be feeling calm. I want to be feeling measured. You might get like 10 different emotions. Like, they know what they want to feel differently. Or you might have a client that struggles with that, and that might be the work there. So, okay, so you wanted to feel calm and in control and measured. What would you need to be thinking about this situation in order to feel that way? I'd need to be thinking that I've got enough time. Okay. What else would you need to be thinking? That I can get other people to help me. Like I can ask for help. Okay. Anything else? They might say something else, or they might say no, those things. Okay. So if you thought that you had time and that you could ask other people for help, and that's it, and you then were feeling calm and you were feeling in control, what would you be doing? And they might say, I'd create a plan and I would follow the steps. I would go and have a conversation with this person and that person. And you'll probably notice that their energy will change, their breathing will slow down, and they are then able to be back in the present moment, able to connect with their knowledge, skills, and experience, and feel that familiar feeling of like, I can do this. It's okay. It's like that thing that has got out of perspective, then has returned to the perspective like this thing is not bigger than your client. And I think one of the things people can experience with overwhelm is they can feel like the thing, you know, you talked about a boundary and putting those things there. If it's one thing or a number of things, all of a sudden there is this sense and feeling that it is somehow bigger than them, and again that they are tiny. So some coaches might use the like, what are you in control of? What can you influence? What can you neither control or influence? There's lots of different tools and techniques you can use. Or of course, you can use your free coaching style, you know, being in the moment, using some of those clean language approaches and skills.
Reminds me to help your client to recognize that emotions are not permanent. And I think
Mm.
overwhelm is one of those emotions that can feel like it's going to be there forever because you're in this place, you're overwhelmed, you've got all the things, you know, however you're experiencing, and it feels very permanent when you're in it. And coaching, I feel, is like a reminder of like, let's just pause, you know, for a moment and let's just re-engage. Like, when will be the time that this has passed? And they might say, like, oh, in like 3 months. So, are you going to be feeling overwhelmed 24/7 for the next 3 months? And they might say, like, yeah, 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 yeah. And then you get to break it down with your client, like, really? Well, probably not, because there will be times when I'll be walking the dog. You know, I don't feel overwhelmed when I'm walking the dog. Like, great. When else? And suddenly the person you're with starts to reconnect to all the other emotions that are available to them and that they can feel. And if they can reconnect in that moment, as Joe just described, you will see that overwhelm start to subside because it isn't an all-encompassing thing, although it can feel like it. So, you know, hopefully that, sorry, Joe, I've interrupted you. I just saw
No,
you were
no.
going to come in with some golden
You saw
nugget to finish us
my
off.
mouth move. Well, I was just thinking like another approach, and this may, and you've got to think about the timing of these things, and you know, obviously understand where the client is at. But let's say you've done some practical things, you can see that there's some light, you know, coming into your client's world around this topic. You could then say to them, "What's the good news story about overwhelm?" And they're like, your client might say to you, "Do you know what? Like right now." Like what I've realized is this is like a familiar pattern. I always feel overwhelmed before I get into like hyper focus, or I always feel overwhelmed before I create my best work. Um, and so then it's about they're like, oh, actually, I know, as you were saying, Zoe, like I can see this is gonna come good. But also, as the coach and the client, you then might say, is this something that would be useful? Is this a pattern that might be useful for us to explore further in the next session? So you're then moving away from the overwhelm as a thing in one session to help your client with, but it's like, how is this serving the client? So if the client says, you know, I always feel overwhelmed before that, do you want to always feel overwhelmed before that? Or would you like to feel something else, you know, or rather than overwhelm that cluster, do you want to break those things out so you know, actually, before I build up to think I'm going to feel this emotion and then this emotion and then this emotion? So your client will tell you, but you might need to just ask the question, because one of the roles for a coach is to help the client to notice patterns and to help them check, how is this serving me? Is this something that I'm happy with, or is this something that I would like to change? And that's up to the client, obviously, because it's their life, they get to choose.
I feel like this could be a training in itself, Joe, how to coach overwhelm? Because in my head now, I've got like 5 to 6 other things. It's like, because we haven't really talked about the practical side of it either, which is, building a plan, helping the client to prioritize, and how do they prioritize it, connecting with their values. So there's, these are not the only ways to coach overwhelm. So if you're listening to this and thinking, oh, well, I coach it in this way, probably valuable, probably great. The key is your client getting the value from the experience that they're having with you? So I hope today's just given you more nuggets and inspiration and creativity to think about the different ways that you can support your clients if you're a coach with overwhelm, but equally people in your life. So if you're not a coach, people in your life that you may see struggling or come to you for guidance, help and advice. It's not always about just sitting with the person and inviting them to calm down and focus on one thing at a time. It's about deep listening and supporting your clients to really connect back in with their experience and break things down.
And so, if you found this episode helpful and you haven't already, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast. It really does make a difference for other coaches or people interested in coaching being able to find our podcast. And we love to read your reviews. It gives us great ideas for future podcast episodes too.
We do. And we wouldn't be able to do an emotions-based podcast without inviting you to come and check out our emotions coaching practitioner program on our website, which you can find at www.igcompany.co.uk/emotions coaching.